Happy Thanksgiving Eve, and it's good to have you along for another edition of Behind the Point Spread. Yes, it's a later night, but you know what? None of us have to work tomorrow anyway, unless you're Scott Spreitzer, who works 7 days a week, 365, because that's what a professional, handicapper and better does. But before we get started with another edition of Behind the Point Spread, let's go ahead and tell you how you can participate in tonight's show if you feel free to do so. Of course, this is a live call-in show, so if you want to ask Dr. Rob a question, if you want to ask me a question, I don't know why the hell you'd want to ask me a question, but if you ask Scott Spreitzer the question, because he's the smart guy on the show. No, I shouldn't say that. Dr. Rob's really smart. He's got the second highest Wonderlic in NFL history. It's just Scott's smart in a different way, right? Guys, I think I'm saying that right. I don't know if I'm saying that right or not. I'm digging myself a hole with Dr. Rob right now. That's what I am doing. But make sure to follow us on all the social media channels, Doc Talk Sports on the YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe to that channel and like our Facebook page. Follow Dr. Rob on Twitter, or follow me on Twitter at Travis Creates. Hey, coming out tomorrow will be a brand new Doc Talk podcast, and you are going to want to listen to this one. It is very enlightening. It's very interesting. We talk about a lot of stuff, but the former CEO of TD Ameritrade, former head coach of the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers, Joe Moglia, is on the podcast, and you are going to have a blast with Joe Moglia because that dude's a hoot, and he doesn't hold back. He's about as honest as they come. Wouldn't you say that, Dr. Rob? About as honest as they come with Joe Moglia.
Zero filter.
Have you ever met Joe Moglia, Scott? I don't mean he's he lived in Omaha for a long time. He ran TD Ameritrade, CEO, chairman of the board for a long time. Went on to be the head coach of Coastal Carolina, and he's got a lot of. Well, first of all, we talk about the FXT or FTX or whatever that thing is that went all belly up, and then we get in. He has really no like for the NCAA, zero like for the NCAA. And he has some pretty strong opinions on NIL too. But first of all, oh my God, you're like the busiest guy in Vegas. Take us through your day and how we got here tonight.
Yeah, we just been running around. Usually Wednesday, Thursday. Wednesdays kind of get when it gets busy. Thursdays when it's super busy. Friday it's back to busy. Saturday it's like super busy on steroids. And so it's kind of one of those situations right now where all that got kind of rolled into one on Wednesdays before Thanksgiving. And kind of forget about it till it comes. It's like Monday. I'm going, oh crap! But
now, is your daughter back in town?
She was back 2 weeks ago, and she just surprised us with a text message about an hour or so ago, saying, "I got tickets. I'll be there on Friday." We weren't expected to see her again until Christmas vacation for about a month. So that was like December 20th, 21st, whatever. But yeah, she just surprised us with a little text. I'll be there Friday morning. And I said, no, man, come on, man. I got to pick up the airport. I got USA England going on. But I got something in common with your next podcast guest. I've not been a big fan of the NC2A since they put me in a report about 25 years ago or so with about 30 other guys that said coaches and players alike, stay away from these guys. And I was part of that little group of 30, 35 guys who they told to stay away from. And I thought that was kind of funny, kind of a feather in the cap to a certain extent.
So this Rob, does this kind of like remind you of when Washington and the communist thing, when they went after Hollywood people, the NCAA went after gamblers and stay away. These are bad guys.
Not like the Red Scare and McCarthyism.
Yeah. was this McCarthyism on bettors back in the day?
Kind of.
I would probably say maybe it's sort of a mild restriction upon free market enterprise. But my question is, what got you in a position that you would actually be in contact with college football players in the first place?
Well, the show that I did when I was 20, let's see, I would have been 20. No, I would have been 30 when I first started doing the TV show, or 29. And Jack Snow, the former Notre Dame great, and of course Rams receiver and great guy, God rest his soul. But Jack Snow was the host of our TV show that we did nationally in the mid to late 90s. We did shows with Mike Ditka. Let me see who else. Drew Pearson, Randy White, all those guys. And so even though those guys were retired professional football players, they still put out the word that these are the guys in the sports books you want to stay away from. I've never fixed a game in my life.
So this was all on. So this was all on the gambling side. It wasn't.
Absolutely, yeah.
It wasn't a. Hey, these guys are potential sports agents that you might want to shy away.
Oh, no. This was all about sports betting. This was all, these guys are bad guys because they try to beat the spread. And boy, you better stay away from them. Don't be seen hanging out with these guys. And what was funny is I was doing that Stardust Live show, which was pretty popular back then. It was in about 13 or 14 states. It was in Baja, Mexico at Caliente Racing Sportsbook, piped in there, all over the place. And it was a very famous show because of the guys who did it before I came along in the early 90s. And then I did it for 5 years. And we would have, they would say this stuff, but yet we'd have Jerry Tarkanian come down and sit in on the show with us in front of the crowd at the Stardust. We had all kinds of professional football players that would come down, some former. One of my favorites that we had was Dan Pastorini, the old
there's a name.
quarterback. He did quite a few shows with us back in the day. He'd come in town representing Crown Royal during the rodeo. National Finals Rodeo, so he'd sit on like 3 or 4 shows when he'd be in town. So we had him on a few times. We had, Joe Frazier, all these athletes who would come in and sit in with us and be there right on the strip doing the show. And what happened was, Tark's there, a couple of other coaches, and then that big scandal came out a couple of times, like the Arizona State Washington scandal, which was, by the way, discovered and found out and reported by Las Vegas sportsbooks. They said there's something fishy going on with this point spread. They did a TV show, a documentary on this, and they said there's something fishy going on in a few sportsbooks in Las Vegas. There are guys who we don't know who are dropping, 6 figures in different hotels. Got to check this out. That line was like 8 points had moved in a game, in like a 24-hour period. And they found out. They did a documentary on it. I don't know if it's still on like Netflix or one of those things where they found out that there was some shady business going on with some guys down in Arizona and other parts around the country back east. And if it wasn't for the sports books, if it wasn't for the one state that had legalized gambling back then, it might not have ever been discovered. It might have gone on for a while. And that's, when Travis was talking about legalized gambling in Nebraska, the states that haven't done it yet, you are more likely to catch bad stuff going on, nefarious operations going on when you've got legalized betting than you do when you don't have legalized betting. That's the hypocrisy of it all. So anyway, I guess that's what got me on the radar or the NC2A screen. And when they first had their websites come out and all that, they had about 35 of us, I would say, that were listed on this, stay away from these guys list.
And that's actually a compliment because that's saying you're really good.
Or just that I had a loud mouth and was known. It's one or the other. So I didn't care either way. Like I said, I decided to wear it as a badge of honor, a feather in the cap, and I felt bad for the other 3,000 guys in the business who won't even mention, You can hang out and have dinner with them, I guess, but, with me, you can't look at me funny. But anyway, it was just an interesting time. And the NC2A I've never been crazy about. They never wanted anything to do with Vegas. Once the money got involved, Vegas hosts every other freaking basketball conference tournament at the end of the year that you can imagine. There's 4 or 5 going on within a 5-mile radius of each other at 4 or 5 different arenas. The Final Four just landed here for, I think it's 2028 or 29. I mean, Tark would be smiling from ear to ear right now, but we'd also probably leave town. He'd probably say, you know what, have at it. I'm not going to be here when you fools are here.
So 402-543-5556 if you want to call the show. Also, you can leave comments in the comment section if you're on YouTube. I think you can do it on Facebook and Twitter as well. Let's dive into the least sexiest game I think we have of the night. But you put this up here for good reason. It's Southern Miss against Louisiana Monroe. Southern Miss, a 3-point favorite. The over-under at 50.5, Scott.
I can remember in the mid to late 90s, real quick about Southern Miss. I was doing a TV show. We were talking about one of their games. And I just happened to say it the way it was. I'm like, boy, the boys know how to ball down in Hattiesburg. My gosh, you should have seen the emails, the complimentary emails I got and the fan base I got out of the Hattiesburg area from just saying that. And I really meant it. I still do at times. And, here they are. They're a moneymaker. They're 11-3 against the spread going back to last season, 8-3 this year. The thing is, though, is they were 5-3 straight up, and they've dropped 3 straight games going into this contest. So now all of a sudden, and by the way, those 3 losses, 2 of them, they were an underdog. One of them, they were virtually a pick'em. So it wasn't like they were supposed to go out and blast teams off the field in those games. And now they've got a chance to get that bowl clinching or bowl eligible victory to try to get number 6 here. Their offensive numbers, not much better than UL Monroe's, but that defense gives them a big advantage in this game. UL Monroe's 111th against the run. They're around 90th against the pass. They allow over 35 points per game. And Even in their upset win over Georgia State, they were a 14-point dog, UL Monroe, and they beat Georgia State a couple of weeks ago. They gave up 186 yards rushing. They ran for 75 themselves. They gave up 349 yards passing in that win, and they threw for 225 themselves. They got destroyed as far as the stats, but they got 15 points off of special teams and a pick six and a 2-point conversion. So I think Southern Miss catches them here, some value. I like them to get the win. They're only laying 3. I actually made the number 5.5, so I jumped on Southern Miss.
So you did go out to this game this week then?
Yeah, this is a play, definitely. Southern Miss.
So Rob, Ryan wants to know, and I think I have an idea, but he says, what's Rob drinking? And if I recognize that can, that is a Koala Tears from Cross Strain. Am I correct?
I am sipping a Koala Tears from Cross Strain.
So I don't know if you're a big beer drinker or not, Scott, but this is a local brewery and it's really, really good. But that is a banana sour. And it sounds like it's not appealing, but Rob, back me up here. That's a kick-ass beer.
It is. It is a Berliner Weiss style sour with banana and vanilla. I mean, I'm trying to like get this as close as I can.
It's a really, really good beer, and you can pick it up at both Cross Trains locations. You got the Draftworks down in Millwork Commons, and of course the Draft House or the Tap House out in Papillion.
It is. I will say it is probably the most. I mean, if I had to pick a style of beer and the flavors that I did not think would go well with it, this is what I would have come up with.
Nice.
And we've got some great places back there, man. I mean, we've got some places, but they're all usually, $20 a beer, and you can get 100,000 different beers. And
you need to get back to Nebraska, Scott. You need to rediscover your roots.
Absolutely.
Auburn, the Iron Bowl. You got Auburn taking on Alabama. Before you get started on this, let me tell you my Auburn Alabama story. So I went down to, I think it was 1994. I went down to Auburn, Alabama. I went down to watch Alabama play Southern Miss at Legion Field. Gene Stallings was still the head coach.
Okay.
I think they were either coming off the national championship or they'd won the national championship the next year, but they were a pretty good team. But they were still playing at Legion Field at the time. And I was just trying to get an idea for the culture and everything that was happening in Alabama, because I was familiar with Iowa State. I was familiar with Nebraska, Oklahoma at that time. And I said, I went to an Alabama fan. I said, what's the Iron Bowl like? What does that mean to everybody in the state? And in this really, really thick Southern drawl, I'll never forget this. He goes, well, let me put it this way, son. If Jesus Christ himself showed up in the middle of the Iron Bowl, we'd say, thank you very much. Get your ass off the field and let us play football, and we'll talk to you later. And I went, oh, you would kick Jesus Christ off the field just to let the game be played. And I'm like, that just takes it to a completely different level. And if people need to understand, it's nothing but bad blood between Auburn and Alabama.
And yet the Iron Bowl has been the quietest rivalry we've talked about this year. It's crazy. Yeah. I mean, have you ever heard like no excitement at all from everybody outside of the state of Alabama for the Iron Bowl like this? I mean, it's kind of crazy. Of course, you got Bama, who, is not going to play for a national title. They're not going to play for an SEC championship, basically. So it's a situation where I handicapped this into the mix, and I have never handicapped this into a football game. I don't think ever, maybe once or twice. But when you talk about Alabama, you're talking about a quarterback that when he led his team from behind to beat Texas and Austin this year, he looked like a front runner for the Heisman. He was a projected Heisman hopeful before the season began, talking about Bryce. And the thing is, in this game, this is their last game, I bet. I'll bet anything. I'm not anything, but you know what I mean? I'll bet anything reasonable that Bryce doesn't play in the bowl game, that there are a few other Alabama Crimson Tide players who have a chance to make money at the next level, big money by drafted in the first or second round. Will Anderson, for example, that might not play in the bowl game. And so they've got nothing to play for after this. So I think these guys are kind of going to come out and give it their all. Not that they don't all season long, but that little tiny bit of extra motivation of, this could be my last time I've ever wear this Crimson Tide uniform and put on this helmet. And as far as Auburn is concerned, Cadillac Williams took over. They played a better brand of football. They won the last couple of games, but it was against Western Kentucky and a Texas A&M team that is all but shut it down weeks before they played Auburn. He did bring to this team, I thought, Cadillac Williams, the desire to actually go out and try to win football games again after a rough go of it in the middle of the season before they let their head coach go. But again, I think it's a tough spot for Auburn because if Alabama's fired up, they can beat anybody in the country, maybe not Georgia, but everybody else. And I think they're going to be ready to go in this game. Probably win like 35-10 in that neighborhood. The line is 21.5, 22. So it's not a bet for me. I just thought it would be an interesting game to talk about, especially because you've got something that might be going on with Bama again that I've never spoken about before. Alabama played a regular season football game, and the players, key players thinking this is going to be it. This might be, we're going to opt out for the bowl game with some of those players. But real quick, I wanted to throw it back to you guys by saying you said to discover my roots. I do want to come back to Omaha one of these days in the near future. Not a year from now, not 2 years from now, but in the next few months. And my roots, though, were Falstaff, guys. Falstaff. That's what I got in Omaha.
Shit, I don't even know if I can get you Falstaff right now. I can get you hams. I can get you hams. I get you PBR. Yeah. I think I can get you
They had Falstaff back for a while there.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was the big thing back when I was a kid.
Well, while you're bringing it up, Bo writes in on YouTube, says, "Hey, what's everyone's Thanksgiving beer / drink of choice?" Not to interrupt the bet talks. Hey, we've got all night here. So, Scott, when you sit down at the Thanksgiving table tomorrow, what are you going to be drinking?
I'm going to have what I normally have, which is going to be a Guinness. I like to chew on my beer a little bit. I think it goes good with at least my taste buds when it comes to a Thanksgiving dinner. And after I've slipped into a little tryptophanic bliss, after a couple of hours, probably early evening tomorrow night, after I get my college basketball done for Friday, I'll sit and I'll have a little bit of Woodford Reserve. I'll probably have a glass of Woodford. So it'll be a couple of Guinness during dinner and a Woodford in the evening as I ease into Friday morning.
Dr. Rob?
I've got a couple more of the cross strains here. And then I was down in Lincoln a few days ago. I actually picked up some of that Corn Coast Brewing beer while I was down.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Nice.
Got a few more of those to try.
Yeah. I'm going to be pretty boring. And Rob knows this. The only time I really kind of drink beer is with Rob and during the podcast. I'll be mostly a red wine guy tomorrow. But I'll probably finish up the night with a double whiskey. Usually, I've got a Breckenridge upstairs. I also have some Basil Hayden's that I like to drink. So, and I might even make an old fashioned here or there. Dustin wants to know who's the Iowa State fan in my house. So you can see I've got a lot of different things here. I've got the Iowa helmet up there. I've got the Nebraska helmet. The Iowa State, my wife is actually an Iowa State graduate. We've got the Creighton pendant right there. We've got a Rock Chalk Jayhawk one back there somewhere too.
Trav, we all know you're the Iowa State fan.
Stop it, Rob. Yeah, you just sit there and you know.
Kind of like Nebraska. You hate Iowa. You love Iowa State.
Oh man. Yet I host the Iowa Hawkeye call-in show after the game.
I know, it's weird. It's really weird.
Chris wants to know, Doc, are you still basking in the Monday Night Wild win for Westside? So if you didn't know this, Scott, Westside beat Gretna for the Class A state championship in the state of Nebraska. It happened on a last-second field goal to win. What was it, 43-42, the final score?
43-41.
43-41.
So kind of the backstory, Scott. So last year, Gretna, as an underdog, upset Westside 7-3.
Okay.
And they've got their quarterback, Gretna's quarterback, outstanding quarterback named
going to Oklahoma State.
Okay. Yeah. Oklahoma State commit. Ohio State's still after him pretty strongly. My understanding is he might be at the Ohio State-Michigan game this weekend. So the interesting thing is so last year Westside held him to 7 points in a 7-3 win for Gretna. And the joke was that if you had told me before the game Gretna was going to get held to only 7 points, there's no way Westside doesn't win that game 50-7. We lose 7-3. This year, that Zane Flores goes out. They score 41 points. He sets a Class A state finals record with 414 yards passing in the game.
Wow.
3 touchdowns. And if you had told me he's gonna set a state Class A passing record and throw 3 touchdown passes, and the team's Gretna's going to put up 41 points, I would have said there's no way Westside wins that game. Sure enough, Westside scores 43 and wins the game.
What Rob's forgetting to tell you is a year ago when Westside got beat, they got so mad they turned in Gretna for an ineligible player and had the state title stripped from Gretna. That's how upset those Westside people
Are you
were.
serious?
You're killing me.
It
did not quite happen that way.
That's what he'll tell you.
Gretna did have a player that was ineligible. It was a transfer, and they hadn't done the correct paperwork or filing of that.
So Westside turned him in.
10 different schools turned in Gretna. It was.
That's classic.
Anyway.
Isn't it though? It really is.
You make one joke about Iowa State.
But the NSAA, the Nebraska's NC2A came down upon Gretna, was notified and came down on them about.
Stay away.
I think initially notified them like 2 weeks after the state title game, but then it was about a month later, a couple or 6 weeks later, whatever it is, came in and officially stripped them from the title.
So who goes in the record books then? Westside, I would guess, right?
Nobody.
They actually left it vacated.
Wow, that's wild.
Yeah, which to Westside's credit, Travis, Westside does not claim that title at all and told the NSAA they didn't want anything to do with it. They lost the game on the field that night. And
that's the way to handle it.
Yeah.
The
title remains vacated. I can hear my son in the next room yelling, "Feeders!"
See, it was Westside that turned him in, Scott.
I was going to say a couple of things stuck out to me in that. First of all, you just said in this game, this recent state championship, there were 400 and some odd yards of passing by one quarterback. And I'm thinking, I'm a few years older than Rob and Dr. Rob, and I'm thinking back in my day in the early 80s. I graduated in 84. I don't know if there was 400 yards thrown in a season by the Bellevue West quarterback, who went on to play D-line for Nebraska in the mid-90s. But
which, by the way, now Bellevue West has like 600 yards passing per game, don't they, Rob? I mean, they throw the football all over the place.
Yeah, they've churned out, I think, 2 or 3 straight college quarterbacks now.
Yeah, I remember back then. I was my one of my brother's wives. So my sister-in-law's brother was a guy named Bill Berg, and he played at Bellevue High before there was a Bellevue West, mid-'70s. Excellent player. He went on to play for Morningside, and then he actually got a few snaps in preseason for a couple of years with the Chicago Bears, and he had a banged-up knee and all that kind of stuff, and that was that. But I bring him up because when I was probably 12 or whatever, and I was going to Logan Fontenelle Junior High, which I think is Logan Middle School now or whatever they call it, and I was probably in the 8th grade. It was 7 through 9 was in middle school back then. And I remember sitting there with Bill Berg one day, and I said, "Man, I want to be a tight end. I want to be a tight end, Bill. Well, we've got the new school, Bellevue West." And he goes, "Get ready to block, son. Get ready to block because they don't throw the ball." It kind of changed everything I wanted to do at that point. He's like, "You might get like 3 targets in the course of a 9-game season." So
I think anymore Bellevue West puts out a college quarterback and like four college wide receivers almost on a yearly basis. So. Which you mentioned Morningside's quarterback right now, Joe Dolenchek. I think he's Morningside's all-time leading passer. He might have the NAIA all-time yardage record, and he's a 4-time national titleist there.
Wow.
Bellevue West kid.
I went up there, guys, to Morningside. I think it was towards the end of my junior season. It was like spring of my junior season. There was about 6 of us from eastern Nebraska that took the van ride up there and were hosted and all that kind of stuff, which was really cool. The pep rally was college basketball season in February. UNO with a guy by the name of Dean Thompson had UNO like in the top 5.
Dean the Dream, baby.
Yeah,
everybody knows, and his brother Tommy.
Yeah, I can remember him. I remember Morningside was in the top 5 in college basketball Division II back then. And so that was the big event that night. So they took us to the pep rally, did all this kind of stuff. And they left us on our own. We were supposed to have some host in the dorms, never showed up. And so me and these 2 kids who ended up going to Nebraska Wesleyan were like running all over campus, went back to Omaha the only reason I didn't go there is because it's so freaking cold that weekend. I'm
like, I would have said the only reason you didn't go there because it was Sioux City. Yeah,
well,
yeah.
Well,
just said Sioux City.
I was trying to be nice. So you guys as soon as I thought it was out, they dragged me back in, right?
Cold. It's cold.
Hey, if you want to call into the show, we're getting a lot of comments coming in, but if you want to call into the show and ask Scott a question, feel free to do so at 402-543-5556. It's 402-543-5556. All right, the game. Michigan at Ohio State. Ohio State a 7.5-point favorite. The over-under at 56 on this, Scott. I'm just going to start this one. For some stupid reason, I like Michigan in this game.
Okay. There's nothing stupid about that. You're getting more than a touchdown. Listen, the Buckeyes have that revenge factor for what it's worth. I think in a game like this, it might be worth, a few plays, a few motivational plays for the first 5 or 6 plays, and then it's what you can do on the field, I would guess. But what that loss did last year, giving up 42 points to UM, they kind of found out they got to get stronger and better on defense if they're going to play for national championships, Big Ten championships, all that kind of stuff. And their defensive numbers are very good this year. 15th against the run, 11th against the pass. The fact that they can slow opposing ground games means that J.J. McCarthy is going to have to throw deep probably more often than Michigan wants to and more than he wants to. And the aerial game is going to have to be better. They're 100th out of 131 college football teams in passing the football. They haven't needed to pass the football a whole lot, but this is the spot where they're probably going to have a decent passing game to at least keep that Buckeye defense guessing a little bit. But you got Blake Corum, who's questionable. He's banged up. The depth at running back's a little bit banged up. Corum is obviously incredible. And then I think as far as the Buckeye offense, I'm not crazy about this Ohio State version. Not sure I trust them fully yet. But I think if that defense for the Buckeyes plays the way they think they will in this game, shuts down the running game a little bit of Michigan, makes them go up top, which they're not great at, then I think they can kind of maybe wear down, if I'm not, if I'm allowed to say that, wear down a little bit over the final quarter and a half, this Michigan defense, which I think might be on the field a little bit too much. At least that's my handicap on the game. I made the game 9. It was 7. It's as high as 8 now. So it's getting a little bit close to my number, but it definitely went up towards my number. I think the Buckeyes end up getting the win and cover here, but I'd be interested to hear why. And listen, man, you don't have to worry about me. I never tell another guy, hey, I don't think your play is going to win.
No,
I never do that stuff, and I really mean that.
For some reason, I'm not sold on the Ohio State defense, but I keep forgetting the Corum may be out on this one, and I just like the way Jim Harbaugh has coached the last couple of years, and what I mean by that is he's just laid low, went about his business, hasn't been as loud. The loudest we've seen him this year is after the Michigan State game when his player got mugged in the tunnel, and 7 guys got charged with a couple of felonies, or not all of them with felonies, but a couple got felony charges today. He's just laid low, and he's gone about just coaching and doing his job, and I think that's made a difference in the way Michigan plays. So maybe I'm crossing my fingers for Michigan, because if Iowa, and we're going to get to the Iowa-Nebraska game, if Iowa gets to the Big Ten title game, I think Iowa can play with Michigan. I really, really do.
Really?
I do.
This is just wishful thinking on your
stop
part,
it.
man.
Would you just stop it? Just stop picking on me.
So Thanksgiving Day drinking is started on Thanksgiving Eve. I'm kidding.
By the way, Rob, here, your rant on Bellevue West on all the wide receivers, and he says now you know why Nebraska struggled the last 20 plus years. Too many wide receivers, not enough O linemen and running backs in the state.
Well, I would add that we did have a Bellevue West offensive lineman on the team, and with AJ Forbes, who just earned all Big Sky Conference honors up at Montana after transferring up there. It is now their starting center. So,
well, wasn't that the identity of the state? Was that like I was a kid, so I don't know, but I guessed that everybody running the football 5 times to every pass in every high school, it seemed like in eastern or central Nebraska, that it was almost like we're trying to be a pipeline to get these kids onto Lincoln. And it just felt that way because everybody ran the football in Nebraska back then. You'd have 6 passes in a game.
Yeah, the other thing is, I think there was always a very high priority in regards to recruiting offensive linemen. You kind of try to stockpile guys a little bit. I think, and if you do it right between both scholarships and kind of being judicious with walk-ons, you can end up with a lot of talent in any one position group. Nebraska just made a priority of that with the offensive line, and it worked, and it worked for years. And there was not just recruiting, but there was a very big priority in terms of development of those guys as well too. came to strength training, skills, and technical development. Those were huge priorities of those coaching staffs over the years, and it ended up showing. I don't know. I mean, I came out of a high school that 2 out of the 3 years I was in high school, we had the leading passer and the leading receiver in the state of Nebraska 2 out of the 3 years I played. So, it's kind of always a take it for what it's worth, but you've got to be able to recruit. You've got to put that emphasis on certain position groups, and you've got to be able to develop. And Nebraska did a great job developing linemen you go back to like Bob Brown in the early 60s all the way through the early 2000s with guys like Finoti. I mean, there were some very good old linemen over a 30-year span there. But it was a priority, and it went into recruiting and development.
So, Scott, before we dive into our final game of the night, I don't want to mean to put you on the spot, but Bo does want to know if South Carolina rides the wave or stumble after last week's win.
My gosh, I think they stumbled, but was that crazy? I was sitting at VSiN Studios at the Circa Sportsbook, Circa Hotel, and we kept rubbing our eyes to see is that 49? Is that 56? Did they just take 63 on Tennessee? I mean, it was nutso. I think they stumbled their toes going into this week. Nothing against the kid personally, but I'm not a big Spencer Rattler fan, and I also don't think he was developed well after he got out of high school. I did know the guy who kind of had a quarterback camp with him when he was in middle school. And
is he a Phoenix kid? He is a Phoenix kid too. He's with Brock Purdy in that bunch, isn't
exactly.
He?
So he was one of the kids in his program, and it had him highly touted, obviously. But I don't think when he got to the next level, he was ever coached up, so to speak. And I don't know if that's his fault or if it was the coach's fault, but he never really got to that potential that everybody thought he had.
Wasn't that Lincoln Riley's staff?
Yep, exactly. Yep.
Well,
so you would think it was the kid not having as much talent as everybody thought. That's what you would think. Now, I'm not saying that's what the deal is, but Lincoln Riley's pretty good with quarterbacks, obviously.
All right, the Heroes game is our final game. This is the one Rob and I have been waiting for all year long because this is when him and I don't see eye to eye all the time. But the Iowa Hawkeyes at home, a 10.5-point favorite against Nebraska. Of course, a 38.5-point over-under, which for Iowa is a high point total, believe it or not. Here's the deal. Iowa is playing really good football right now. They got lucky last week with their defense. The only thing that I think keeps Nebraska in here, Scott, is that it's Mickey Joseph's probably last game as interim head coach, and here's a chance for Nebraska to play spoiler. That's what worries me about this game coming from the Iowa perspective.
Problem is it's the same offensive line that they've had all season long. It's like going up against the number one team in football when it comes to yards per point allowed, that being the Iowa Hawkeyes defense. So, yeah, I try to find those emotional reasons, and I'm thinking, boy, Nebraska has two left, Mickey Joseph's final game in all likelihood, and the fact they can spoil Iowa's season a little bit here. But I don't think it's enough to put me on Nebraska. I had tweeted out, I think it was the day after our show last week when they said Casey Thompson was going to play, and I had mentioned that I wasn't going to bet the game, but I thought Nebraska had a good chance to cover the spread last week with Casey Thompson. And if he's able to play, they got a chance to cover a spread against most of the teams that are around their level of play or the conference games. But when I look at Nebraska, I mean, if you take away the Purdue game when they scored 37, they've scored a grand total of 102 points in their other 7 games under Mickey Joseph. That's less than 15 points per game. So you could argue, and we talked about power ratings last week, you could argue that Nebraska was a better football team under Scott Frost. You could make that argument. They were at least, scoring points last year and this year. The offensive line's not going to move the ball, you would think, consistently. If the Hawkeyes and Huskers play to their form that we've seen all season long, how does Nebraska score more than 10 points? Maybe on a turnover, a pick six, but Iowa doesn't really shoot themselves in the foot. You're right about last week. It's funny how many guys I knew who were on Minnesota and were just loving life. I mean, hating life at the end of that game with the craziness of the way that game turned out. But boy, this just looks like 24-10. That kind of game to me in favor of the Iowa Hawkeyes.
Boy, I don't know where Iowa gets 24 points, but you're probably saying the defense is going to score at least once or maybe a special team score because Iowa's offense can't put up 24 points.
No, it's maybe a touchdown from the defense, or maybe a first and goal or a first and 10 deep in Nebraska territory because of Nebraska's own mistakes. In that neighborhood of 24-10. I mean, the bookmakers are basically calling this that comes out to about 24-14. And so that's kind of what they're looking for, is a 24-14 type of game.
Hey, Scott, so question for you. You mentioned how you're kind of looking for an emotional aspect to this with the Nebraska football team in terms of wanting to get revenge or whatever it is. If that truly plays into this, and it sounds like it's at least a little bit of a piece of your equation when you're figuring these things out, how does that play into when you look at the last whatever it is 7-8 years here where Iowa keeps beating Nebraska? Sometimes it's a close game, sometimes it's not a close game.
Right.
But I mean, you've got a lot of games. I mean, take last year, for instance. It was one of the home games I had a chance to actually go to last year. And Iowa blocks that punt, scores a touchdown, and just utterly and completely deflates the entire stadium, Nebraska's sideline included. That's a pretty big emotional jump there. And I have trouble believing that there's not a certain amount of, I'm going to call it emotional fragility to Nebraska right now, where all it takes is one little thing to go wrong, and this team is just going to be a disaster. I mean,
agree.
What happens when Iowa gets an interception, recovers a fumble, they're going to either set up or get a special team score in this game.
That's true.
What happens to Nebraska emotionally when that happens? I almost look at this and I look at, from the emotional standpoint, I see all of this working in Iowa's favor.
I cannot disagree whatsoever. You know what revenge matters to me? It's like, let's say you had two good football teams that are still good this year, the current year that they're playing. And the year before, something crazy happens. Let's say Iowa was outgained by Nebraska. Both teams are 9-3 or 8-3 type of teams. And the previous season, Nebraska's playing well. They outgain Iowa 450 to 200. Something crazy happens. There's a blocked field goal returned for a touchdown, a pick six at the end of the game. That kind of stuff, to me, I say, okay, and they're still good football teams. We lost to that team. We beat them a couple of times in the last 4 or 5 times we played them. There's some revenge. And again, when I talk about revenge, I always think it probably lasts for about 3 or 4 minutes until things get crazy on the field, the motivation of revenge.
I agree.
And so when Nebraska is as bad as they are, what does revenge matter? It just doesn't matter to me. And so in a game like this, we used to say all the time, when Nebraska used to beat Kansas State every year, and the Kansas, it'd be like, well, you'd hear a handicapper who was maybe kind of new to the business. And they'd be like, Nebraska's beaten them 15 years, 25 years in a row, whatever it was. Kansas State's got their best team they've ever had. This is before Snyder got them back into a top 20 type program. I like K-State to hang the number, to cover this point spread. The line's too big. Or like when you were playing them in Tokyo, that kind of thing. That's too big. And so I'd be like, they've beaten them 25 times in a row. How in the hell does revenge matter? I mean, if revenge mattered, somewhere in the last 25 years, they might have won a football game. When Colorado decided to make Nebraska their rival in the McCartney years, they eventually did. And that was a great move by McCartney, I thought. But in the early time, when he first got there, we're going to make Nebraska our big rivalry game. It's like, you lose every year to Nebraska. How can it be your rivalry? It's one-sided. Well, then he took care of business, and all of a sudden it became a very good football program. So I agree with you. I cannot disagree at all. And Nebraska, we've been saying this, you've said it, since day one this season, before the season kicked off in Ireland. What happens to Nebraska when they've got these plays that they're going to run? They think they're going to be up 10-7 at the end of the first quarter, but oops, a pick six went the other way. They're down 10-0. What happens to that fragile mentality that we've seen under Scott Frost, now Mickey Joseph, when things don't go your way? When you're popped in the chin, Mike Tyson said, everybody's got a real good game plan until you get popped in the chin the first time. And that's where Nebraska's not been tough. They get popped in the chin unexpectedly. They catch an uppercut out of nowhere, and all of a sudden they're staggering for the rest of the game.
And that's why even the whole – I think Nebraska's done some things better since Mickey Joseph's been the interim coach. I say some things, not all things, but some.
He's a rah-rah guy. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. They still come out. They still play hard. They're still out there getting after it and trying to compete. It's not like they've cashed it in.
Right.
But they are not a good team. But mentally, I look at them, and it's kind of that, oh no, here it goes again kind of mentality. That's not going to go away in 7 games with one new interim coach. it's hard to break that cycle of thinking because, I mean, like I said, it takes one play, and we've seen that time and again with this Nebraska team.
Well, and you know it's been lopsided here, don't you, Rob? The Iowa-Nebraska series, just by the way.
What a nice guy.
I'm not dude, I'm the one who just said it earlier in this conversation thread that if and or when Iowa wins this game on Friday, it'll be what, the 8th in a row?
God, Nebraska hasn't won since what, 2014? I think it's the last. It was Bo's last game. Bo's last game.
Be the 8th game in a row that Iowa wins should they win it.
Should be called the Heroes versus Zeros game. I mean, it's been, I'm a Nebraska fan, and I hate to give that kind of a poster crap to Travis Justice, the Iowa State fan.
I'm not an Iowa State fan. My son bought this stuff.
Trav loves some Cyclones.
Man,
what's the chance Mickey Joseph, give him a percentage chance that he's the permanent head coach after Saturday? Is it that bad? 0? Yeah.
Rob?
I'm not saying he should be. I'm just wondering what the chances
are.
I'll say
10%.
10%. And did Matt Rule really say, see you later, guys?
No, he's now, as of tonight, he's back in the mix. So the Matt Rule, the Matt Rule rumors. But Rob and I did a big podcast. First of all, the last podcast we did, you were a huge motivation because we use your power ratings to say, has Nebraska really improved under Mickey Joseph? And the answer to that kind of was no, right? I mean, maybe in some areas of just confidence stuff, but we used your power rankings. But we did 2 podcasts ago. It's like, stop falling for all the rumors, right? Because Trev has run this thing methodically, and it's been almost near perfect since the day he fired Scott Frost. So, you can buy into the rumors, you can hear what you want, but until, I think Rob and I both agree, until you see somebody step on the stage, don't believe anything you hear, right?
I'm not believing anything until I hear Trev announce it.
Trev's been amazing, hasn't he?
Yes.
I mean, I've never seen anything like this.
Yeah.
In my adulthood, of a guy keeping it this hush-hush.
Yeah, what's funny about it is that when he did his press conference when he fired Scott, he was like, hey, you're going to hear rumors. I'm going to talk to people. Doesn't mean I'm interviewing for the job. I might be just getting their expertise and ask them questions. I mean, he absolutely has handled it. But I do have to know this. Rob, Chris says you blew up Twitter tonight, and you did.
You
Okay, so let me see if
people can't take a joke.
Well, and it's one of those things. If you didn't get that this was a joke, that's just brutal. So
it really is. So
what had happened? Somebody put out on Twitter. They screenshotted this, put this out there, and said, "My coworker's dad has a very reliable source." I mean, again, this is already like my cat flosser's uncle's litter box cleaner. That says a contract was made for Rand, and he declined. So we went back after Urban, and Urban Meyer will be our next head coach at Nebraska. 4 years, $8+ million. That's how you know it's real, is they give you the contract terms. Bob on Twitter knows that. So should be signed this weekend. Source used to play for the Huskers and is a donor to the university. So somebody screenshotted that and tweeted it out there with, "Hey, Doc Talk Sports, is this you?" And so, total joke, I respond, "Yeah, I can 100% verify that Urban is the new coach." Fact. Okay, now, if you look at who I'm responding to and what they're responding to, it's pretty obvious. I'm like total tongue-in-cheek, full of crap.
But see, here. I'm going to give you guys a documentary to watch on Netflix, and why the disclaimer is so important. If you have time, it's 4 35-minute episodes called "Pepsi, Where's My Jet?" And it goes back to the mid-90s. You remember the commercial where the Harrier jet landed in the schoolyard, and at the bottom it said Harrier jet 7 million Pepsi points? Well, they never put a disclaimer on it. A dude went and got 7 million Pepsi points, said, "Where's my jet?" And this thing, you have to watch it. And the players in this are quite comical, but it just reminds you got to put a disclaimer on anything because people are so stupid on Twitter, Rob. They believe everything.
Well, and I'll always go back to the fact that I have always said that, well, two things. One, I'm not going to believe anything until I see Trev at a podium with a guide standing next to him, and Trev pulls that guy in and says, this guy is Nebraska's next head coach. Until I see that, I'm not believing anything. But number two, if I know 100% for sure who Nebraska's next head coach is, guess what I'm going to do? I'm not going to say jack squat. I'm not saying anything. I mean, how big an a-hole am I going to look like if I say that and then Trev announces it?
Well,
I mean, it's just,
we'll loan you Marcus Arroyo out here at UNLV. We'll be more than happy to, he can land in Lincoln. Good addition.
I mean, I can think of guys I would love to have. And I mean, I hear the same rumors everybody else is hearing. And I think everybody's got hey, who are the half dozen guys that you think legitimately have a good shot at this? And I'll give you that list. But guess what? It's the same 4 to 6 names everybody else is talking about, because we're all hearing the same rumors from the same people.
The rumor mill. Do you ever place bets on those rumor mills down there in Vegas?
Gosh. No. Never. Because your bankroll will be zilch.
And that's the question. Has Scott ever bet on some of those novelty bets for coaching hires? I mean, that literally just came in.
Yeah, that's great timing. No. I will bet on some props, but for instance, I had Japan and Germany each scoring today, which was minus $1.15 in World Cup soccer. So
do you ever bet on like all the prop bets for the Super Bowl?
It's funny, Rob, because there's 15 pages front and back side of those pages, so 30 pages of props. I bet I'll have on average, I'll say 5 or 6. And what I tell people, the lesson that I always say, their advice, not lesson, but advice that I always tell people going into the Super Bowl before the props come out is make sure you're betting props that can cash whether the team you think is going to win or not. If your team gets blown out and all your props are, bet like towards that team winning and they get blown out from the start, you're done. You're 0-7 or 0-15 or whatever you decide to bet. I tell people have fun with it. For me, I have 5 to 6 usually serious prop bets, and that's it out of several hundred. You could pick and choose. You could find some. Sometimes you got to lay $750 to win 100 or $7,500 to win 1,000 or so on some of those bets, because they're not, Vegas isn't built on giving away free money. There's no doubt about that. Where else can you go in on a deal and have a place, in this case casinos, and say, we have a 99% return, come on in and enjoy? Well, great, I get to put in $100 and I lose something every time I do, but I'm going to come in and enjoy, and I'm going to have a free drink that's watered down. So they don't give away free money. 5 to 6 props and out of hundreds, and they've got to be plays that can happen no matter whether my team that I think is going to win or not. Yeah, that's the best, I think.
Look at that. Take. Jake the Snake won big on Blue Gatorade for the Super Bowl.
Not in the States. that was. We know where you're betting, Jake.
Wait, where's he at? In Puerto Rico?
That might be a Costa Rican or a Panamanian book, because, I don't think maybe DraftKings. I don't know. Maybe one of these books that are out, somewhere else in the state of Nevada. The state of Nevada basically has to be found in the box score in order to be a bet.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I did not know that. See,
other than the coin flip.
We learn something new every single day. Hey, don't forget, after the Iowa game, Dr. Rob's going to be doing the Doc's Diagnosis presented by Centris Federal Credit Union. He'll take a look at the big plays throughout the game and draw some things up. We might even go into some other college football games as well, because we got the Iron Bowl, we got the Egg Bowl, we got all sorts of good stuff. Hey, if you like what you're hearing from Scott Spreitzer, and of course I do, I like talking to Scott every single week. You can hear from him every single day. All you have to do is text the word Doc Talk to the number 29022, and they're going to text you a link where you can have access to all of Scott's important pages, such as his daily free pick videos, as well as a page where you can sign up and get it $60 in Scott's premium member-only picks. Again, that's the word Doc Talk to the number 29022 for free picks from Scott 7 days a week. If you want a free bet from Betfred Sports, you can do one right now, especially if you live in the Omaha area. Download the Betfred Sports app on the Apple or Google Play stores. Make sure to download the Betfred Iowa app and create a new account. Use the promo code DocTalk and get $20. You can also do the same thing in Arizona and Colorado. Don't forget, tonight's show has been for entertainment purposes only. If you do have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Make sure to subscribe to the Doc Talk Sports YouTube page if you're watching on YouTube. Make sure to like our Facebook page at Doc Talk Sports. Follow Dr. Rob on Twitter at Doc Talk Sports, and you can follow me on Twitter at Travis Creates. It is Thanksgiving, Scott, and I do want you to know that I'm very, very thankful for you because you are nice enough to come on here each and every week. And very accommodating because I know you had a busy day today, and I just want you to know that I'm very thankful for you and your friendship and doing this show with us each and every week.
Guys, I'm having a blast doing this show. I really am. I mean, if you can't tell, I mean, I when you talked to me back in August about doing this show, I'm saying sure, because I've always liked. I mean, god awful early or late for me because I go to bed about an hour before you start doing your radio show.
Yes,
But the bottom line is when you said, let's do this thing and it's evening, I'm like, I'm in, baby. I'm in. So I've enjoyed every second of it, getting to know Dr. Rob a little bit. His sense of humor on Twitter is fantastic. I love that shit. So it's been a blast. So I'm actually really thankful of doing this show. No doubt about it. Don't want to be too corny here, but I've enjoyed every second of it.
And Rob, I'm thankful for you. I'm lucky enough that I get to spend most every weekend with you. I think I spend more time with you than I do my wife. So happy Thanksgiving, buddy.
Happy Thanksgiving to you guys. Have a great one.
Hey, just a quick reminder, another podcast is going to drop tomorrow morning. Joe Moglia, former CEO and chairman of the board at TD Ameritrade and former head coach of the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers, joins us. Rob and I had about an hour and 15-minute conversation with Joe Moglia. It's enlightening. It's opinionated. And I'm telling you, you're going to, I don't say you're going to enjoy too many things. I promise you will enjoy this podcast. Again, coming out tomorrow morning. For Scott Spreitzer, for Dr. Rob Zadiska, I'm Travis Justice. Thank you so much for watching Behind the Point Spread tonight. Have a happy Thanksgiving. Be safe, everybody. And maybe we'll come back one more week for the wonderful conference championship game. So we'll be back next Wednesday. We'll determine the time. This later time actually was a lot of people watched and commented tonight. If you have any questions, drop us an email at doctalksports@gmail.com and have a safe and happy Thanksgiving. We'll talk to you next week.